So you're saying that your philosophy, PlanetPeterson, is an amalgamation of various different philosophers over history, okay? And you think that God's not real, so then you think we should use this metaphysical concept of reason to arrive at a thriving society. Have I steel-manned it well?
That's not bad.
Okay, well that means nothing.
You just described it, and you're going to tell me that it means nothing?
So this is one of the more interesting debate setups I've seen, and I'm going to give it a little explanation beforehand because it can be a bit confusing if you don't have the proper context. So this is a debate, which is better between Christian society or secular society, where you've got Jake from Rattlesnaketv on the Christian side and PlanetPeterson on the secular side. Now, what's interesting about this is that Jake didn't really come to display his own worldview. Instead, in his opening, he took on PlanetPeterson's worldview and ethics and then just added Christianity to it. So really, he's just mirroring PlanetPeterson, which is forcing him to critique himself.
Christian authoritarian humanism is a conservative philosophy of life that with supernaturalism affirms our ability and responsibility to lead ethical lives of personal fulfillment whilst aspiring to the greater good of humanity. The life stance of Christian authoritarian humanism is guided by reason, inspired by courage to confront the unknown, and informed by self-serving yet self-evident experiences, encouraging us to live life well and fully. It has persisted throughout the ages and continues to evolve through efforts of thoughtful people who recognize the values and ideals necessary to achieve the greater good. It's actually remarkable how closely my views align with my opponents, albeit with a subtle but crucial nuance.
So this is something that Jake's obviously having a fun time with. He even created his own manifesto. He's using reason and science as guiding principles so that he and PlanetPeterson are on the same playing field. So what he's doing is a form of immanent critique, which is to use PlanetPeterson's own internal standards, values, and assumptions in order to evaluate itself. Now, he's doing this immanent critique in this goofy, satirical embodiment of Peterson's position, but now if Peterson critiques Jake's methodology, it's simply just examining his own.
PlanetPeterson, I would first like to know which humanist manifesto you follow. Is it 1? Is it 2? Is it 3?
I don't follow any manifestos.
So it's the PlanetPeterson manifesto?
No. Do you know it? I don't think you know what secular humanism is.
Well, secular humanism has 3 manifestos, right?
It's the manifestos are not what secular humanism is. I defined it in my opening.
But so what do you follow then? Is it just PlanetPeterson's manifesto?
So the reason why he's asking about this manifesto is because he wants to know what grounds the morality for his societal prescriptions.
I get my inspiration from the culture I live in. Everybody does that.
So you are the authority on secular humanism.
I explicitly said actually kind of the opposite of that. I said I do have my own private ideas, but I draw inspiration from the culture.
You draw inspiration, but we're talking about your ideas.
So the reason why fleshing this part out is important is because if PlanetPeterson doesn't inform his prescriptions from a secularist manifesto, then his societal prescriptions are simply from his own mind. So in other words, they're completely subjective. So now, instead of using the manifesto prop that Jake came prepared with, he can simply drop it and say, okay, then it's your preferences versus my preferences.
Does your worldview, this secular humanist worldview that you adhere to, is there a normative authority? And what happens if another secular humanist comes to you and says, you know what, these Christians, I don't believe in God, but they make some pretty damn good points, and they govern. What's your beef with that?
What's my beef with if secular humanists say, hey, I listened to some Christians and they have good ideas?
So that was really the point of all this right there, is that if your methodology for societal prescriptions is subjective enough, then it could literally lead to anything. So if Jake was to use the exact same methodology and arrive at Christianity to run society, what do you even do about it? It was your methodology in the first place.
What do you do if another secular humanist comes along and says, you know what, all this human thriving, these Christians, Christian authoritarian humanists, make a pretty damn good point. We're going to govern like that. What's your problem with that?
If the inspiration that those Christian secular humanists, Christian secular, that's funny, if the inspiration they draw from that is grounded in trying to understand the human condition and improve upon it, and believing that reason is our guiding principle, and they don't do it by saying, God is telling me we should do this, therefore we should do it, then it is just secularism, and I don't have a problem with that.
Okay, what is reason?
Reason is, that's an interesting question. I would just say it's the tool we use to the mental tool we try to use to understand the world.
So this is a big deal right here, because PlanetPeterson's prescription for building a society is simply a guiding principle of reason. That's it. But then when asked to define reason, he had no definition for it. He actually had to think about it, which means his guiding principle is simply an empty word that he hasn't even had to think about. Now, this type of thing happens when people haven't been challenged enough. So seculars, they can get so used to relying on Christians to give all their ideas, so then they can simply roll out the hits. So like things like Sky Daddy. And things like that sound so absurd that they will keep atheists in their camp. But what you're seeing here is Jake is forcing him to examine his own ideas by acting as a mirror.
Am I using reason?
I don't think you're being reasonable, but I think so.
I think I'm using reason. So
yes, that's very secular.
So I used reason. I'm
take your concession.
If I'm a secular humanist and I've used my reason
secular.
to come to the conclusion that Christianity and the principles of Christianity, Christian authoritarian humanism, are better than yours, what is your problem with that?
I already answered that question, but this is hypocritical of you because you're not relying on authority from God. You have separated yourself from God to do this.
I mentioned him.
Yeah,
Many
you
times.
mentioned him, but you have not drawn your inspiration from it. You haven't proclaimed.
Where else did I get the from?
You didn't pray about it. You didn't
How do you know
consult
I
the
pray
council
about?
of bishops. Well, I feel like you would have said so.
So the reason why PlanetPeterson wants Jake to use more God here is because that's simply what he's prepared for. But Jake is using something similar to a church and state kind of interaction. You know how you get those people that are like, oh, I thought separation of church and state. It's like, okay, well, the church isn't in charge of the state. But if you have religious people voting on religious-inspired law, that's democracy. Then those same people are like, well, I don't think religion has any place to be in government. Okay, well, that's hypocritical because you're giving one option, which is secularism, so that's not democracy. Now, Peterson doesn't want to come off as hypocritical here, and he knows that if he criticizes Jake here, he only ends up hurting himself.
Honestly, I don't even know if this debate can move forward unless I really understand like the crux of your worldview, because right now it is just pure fluff. It is just whatever PlanetPeterson says about being governed by reason. I've just demonstrated that I use reason, so what's the difference between you and I?
If you would have listened to my history lesson, you would have heard how I invoked philosophers who are both Christian and not Christian that informed the worldview that I espouse that I think is preferable. So I don't know what you're doing, but this is just ridiculous.
I'm trying to understand your worldview. I think I'm being pretty good faith here. I'm trying to understand. So you're saying that your philosophy, PlanetPeterson, is an amalgamation of various different philosophers over history, okay? And you think that God's not real, so then you think we should use this metaphysical concept of reason to arrive at a thriving society. Have I steel-manned it well?
That's not bad.
Okay, well that means nothing.
You just described it, and you're going to tell me that it means nothing?
So that means nothing. So there Jake did a steelman, which is to summarize the opposing position in the most generous way possible. PlanetPeterson even agreed to this steelman, which makes this punchline moment even better for Jake. But yeah, all of this means nothing. We must be guided by reason for the flourishing of society. But what does that even prescribe? Does that imply anything? If you use reason and I use reason, we come to different conclusions. Who's even right? There's literally no substance here.
How do we become a Christian society?
Well, a Christian authoritarian humanist society, you mean?
Jake, I'm actually interested in trying to have a somewhat intellectual exercise here.
I would love to, but I have no
But
idea
you're not
what you
going
think.
to. Great.
You're saying that you said to me before that things should be governed by reason. I demonstrated that I'm using reason. If somebody comes along to you as a secular humanist,
then that's just secularism.
and they are using different principles, you actually have no way to combat that.
There's nothing to combat because you literally just appealed to a secular process of reason.
A secular process? How is reason secular?
So to PlanetPeterson's point, he's saying that reason is a process that doesn't require God. but using it this way does have implications that secularists may have a claim to it or use it better, but it's simply just a process that everyone uses for everything. So no, you can't claim reason for yourself.
If I
Even
use
if
my
God is
rational
real.
faculties to arrive at God, how am I not using reason?
I didn't say you're not using reason.
Okay,
I said
so
God's
then we're
not
back
part
to
of
the start.
picture.
Equal playing field. I'm using reason. You're using reason. What separates us?
The way you keep twisting this is insane.
So yeah, that's how that debate began. Now, I personally found this both an interesting and hilarious use of immanent critique. It was fun to watch PlanetPeterson just have no idea where to go with that. And there were definitely a lot more parts in the debate that were interesting, but this setup was something that I really wanted to highlight, so thanks for watching.